During a pro wrestling tag team match in 2015, Rey Mysterio delivered a routine dropkick intended to set up his signature 619 move against Perro Aguayo Jr., but Aguayo slumped lifelessly onto the ropes. Unbeknownst to everyone at first, Aguayo had suffered a fatal cervical spine injury, likely caused by the whiplash to his neck from the dropkick. The match eerily continued on for several minutes before anyone realized that something was seriously wrong. Aguayo was soon rushed to the hospital, but was pronounced dead shortly afterwards. The cause of death was later determined to be cardiac arrest, due to a cervical stroke caused by 3 fractured vertebrae. The coroner stated that the fractures took place at 2 different moments of impact and that Aguayo died almost immediately. Although Mysterio bore no blame, the incident left him devastated since Aguayo had been his longtime friend. It remains one of the only times a pro wrestler died during a match from in-ring trauma. When Steve Burns suddenly left Blue's Clues in 2002, dark rumors quickly began to circulate, including claims that he had vanished in a tragic accident or died from a heroin overdose. In reality, he simply felt that it was time to move on as he began balding and could no longer see himself on a children's show. The day after filming his final episode, Steve shaved his head and stepped away from the cheery world of Blue's Clues, retreating into obscurity to pursue a somber indie music career. The death hoaxes that followed weighed heavily on him, intensifying his struggles with depression and casting a long, unexpected shadow on the legacy he left behind. In 2002, reclusive hoarder Bruce Andrew Roberts shot and killed an intruder who had broken into his home. Instead of reporting the incident, Roberts hid the body in a spare bedroom, covered it with a rug, and used over 70 bottles of air freshener to mask the smell. He lived alongside the mummified corpse for 15 years until it was finally discovered during a cleanup after his death. At age 43, French journalist Jean-Dominique Bauby suffered a bad stroke and became paralyzed. He ended up being diagnosed with the nightmarish condition of locked-in syndrome, where his mind was fully intact, but he couldn't move any part of his body except for one of his eyelids. Bauby eventually blinked out a 130-page novel that was a bestseller, passing away just 2 days after it was published. Ezra Miller has a long track record of disturbingly erratic and violent behavior that has deeply tarnished his public image. In 2020, Miller was caught on video choking a woman and throwing her to the ground outside of a bar in Iceland, an act the victim later confirmed was not staged. In 2022, he was arrested multiple times in Hawaii for aggressive outbursts, including lunging at patrons in a karaoke bar and throwing a chair that struck a woman in the head. That same year, Miller was accused of grooming a 12-year-old girl and using drugs, intimidation, and emotional manipulation to control her. He then hosted a woman and her children inside a home in Vermont that was allegedly filled with unattended firearms and marijuana, where one toddler reportedly nearly choked on a bullet. Reports have also surfaced of Miller claiming to be a messianic figure, identifying as both Jesus and the devil. With his career now in shambles, Miller has acknowledged his suffering from complex mental health issues. Celine Dion lost both her husband and brother to cancer within the same week in 2016. She performed shortly after their deaths, later saying the stage was the only place she didn't feel pain. In 2021, a 45-year-old man named Thangula Satish died in India after his rooster, armed with a 3-inch blade for an illegal cockfight, slashed his groin as it tried to escape, severing a major artery and causing him to bleed out before he reached the hospital. The rooster was briefly detained at a police station before being transferred to a local farm. In 1974, the mutilated body of a woman was found neatly placed on a beach blanket in the dunes of Provincetown, Massachusetts. Her hands were missing, her teeth removed, and her skull was crushed on one side, yet her hair was styled and her toenails painted. Known for decades only as the Lady of the Dunes, her identity remained a mystery despite widespread speculation. Over the years, she was linked to escaped convicts, mob enforcers, and even a missing extra from the film set of Jaws. Finally, in 2022, nearly 50 years later, forensic genealogy identified her as 37-year-old Ruth Marie Terry from Tennessee, and her husband, a con man with a dark past, was named the likely killer. Lady Gaga has publicly shared that when she was 19 years old, she was raped by a music producer who left her pregnant and abandoned after she became badly ill. She's never named the attacker, but recounted that the producer threatened to burn all of her music if she didn't comply with his demands. Gaga later revealed that the trauma led to years of physical suffering and ultimately caused a complete psychotic break. She has never disclosed what happened to the baby. People living within a mile of a golf course have more than twice the odds of developing Parkinson's disease. This is due to continued exposure to certain pesticides, including neurotoxins, which are used to keep fairways and greens well groomed. In 2016, Melissa Ann Blair visited her murderous boyfriend Anthony Powell at the Oregon State Penitentiary and passed him 7 small balloons filled with methamphetamines while kissing him. Powell swallowed the balloons to smuggle them into the prison, but 2 of them ruptured in his stomach, leading to his eventual death from methamphetamine toxicity. Creator of Naruto Masashi Kishimoto endured a grueling work schedule that pushed him to the brink of physical and emotional collapse. He routinely worked up to 20 hours per day, leading to several hospitalizations, and even missing the birth of his own child due to crushing deadlines. By the final arcs of Naruto, he admitted to feeling emotionally numb, simply trying to survive the demands of the series. Writing certain death scenes took a drastic personal toll on him, and he received constant death threats from fans over controversial plot decisions. Much of his work was inspired by feelings of deep isolation and insecurity, stemming from his youth and the constant comparisons to his twin brother. These personal struggles bled into Naruto's themes of loneliness, rejection, and the desperate need for acknowledgement. In 1992, Pepsi launched a promotion in the Philippines called Number Fever, offering 1 million pesos to anyone with the winning bottle cap number, a life-changing prize for most people in the country at the time. On May 25th, the winning number announced was 349, but due to a printing error, over 600,000 caps with that number had been distributed. Thousands of people thought they had won, only to be told their prizes wouldn't be honored, and chaos quickly ensued. Riots broke out, Pepsi trucks were bombed, and at least 5 people were killed, including a mother and her child when a grenade was thrown at a delivery truck. Pepsi offered small consolation payments, but the damage was done. The scandal became one of the most infamous marketing disasters in history, and Pepsi never fully regained public trust in the Philippines. In August of 1993, 4-year-old Derek Roby had been walking alone to summer camp when 13-year-old Eric Smith lured him into the woods under the guise of showing him a new shortcut. Once they were out of sight, Smith strangled Derek until he was unconscious, brutally smashed his head with a large rock, then poured Kool-Aid into the boy's wounds. Before fleeing the scene, Smith removed one of Derek's shoes and scattered the contents of his lunchbox all around him, creating a disturbing and almost ritualistic display that baffled investigators. The child's body was found later that day, just yards from the park he never made it to. Smith later confessed and was tried as an adult despite his young age, receiving 9 years to life in prison. He was denied parole 10 times over the years, with Derek's family attending each hearing to oppose his release. After 27 years behind bars, Smith was finally granted parole in 2022, sparking debates about whether someone capable of such violence at 13 can ever truly be reformed. Isaac Hayes, the iconic soul singer who played Chef on South Park, left the show in 2006 under mysterious circumstances. A statement was released in his name, claiming he was against the show's mocking of Scientology, which he practiced. However, creators Trey Parker and Matt Stone were skeptical, noting his prior support for the show's satire of other religions. It turned out that at the time, Hayes had just suffered a debilitating stroke that impaired his ability to communicate, and his son later revealed that Isaac's fellow Scientologists spoke on his behalf while he was incapacitated. South Park responded with the episode The Return of Chef, portraying Chef as brainwashed by a cult before he's brutally killed off. The show's creators assembled Chef's lines by splicing together audio clips from previous episodes.
No, Chef, they filled your head with lies. Can't you see that?
Get the hell out of here!
Hayes tragically died in 2008 after being found unconscious next to a running treadmill, the result of another stroke. Growing up in sunny Burbank, California, Tim Burton often felt out of place, finding comfort in solitude at a cemetery at the end of his street, since it was a lonely and emotional place where no one would bother you. It became a quiet refuge where he could think undisturbed by himself, nurturing an early fascination with the macabre that would later define his unique Gothic style. Burton created the character of Edward Scissorhands to reflect his own feelings of isolation, with the image of a man with scissors for hands symbolizing the pain of wanting to connect with others but being unable to do so without causing harm. Rigor mortis stiffens the muscles after death, but once it wears off, limbs can twitch or shift due to muscle relaxation or gas buildup. These movements can be so startling that morticians have reported bodies appearing to sit up, raise their arms, or even turn their heads. In 1957, 22-year-old rock star Jerry Lee Lewis married his teenage first cousin Myra Gale Brown in Mississippi. At the time, Lewis had still been married to another woman, while Myra Gale was only 13 years old and still believed in Santa Claus. After riding a big wave of success with hits like Great Balls of Fire, the scandalous marriage effectively destroyed Lewis's career. In 2003, 28-year-old marine biologist Kirsty Brown became the first known human killed by a leopard seal while she was snorkeling near a research station in Antarctica. Without warning, the seal grabbed her by the head and dragged her beneath the icy water, diving down for several minutes and resurfacing with her body before diving down again several times, eventually pulling her as deep as 230 feet. Her colleagues watched helplessly as the powerful predator treated her like prey, mimicking the way it would typically toy with penguins before drowning them. After holding her underwater for 6 minutes, the seal finally released Kirsty, but despite desperate CPR attempts, she never regained consciousness. In 2012, NYPD officer Gilberto Valle was arrested after his wife discovered he'd been posting on fetish forums about kidnapping, torturing, and eating women, including her. He had detailed abduction plans, photos of real women he said he was targeting, and even searched online for recipes for cooking human meat. The FBI found his chats on a site called Dark Fetish Net, where he discussed taking advantage of his police access to stalk victims. Though convicted in 2013 for conspiracy to kidnap, his conviction was later overturned when a judge ruled the evidence was insufficient to prove intent, calling the chats fantasy roleplay. An appeals court upheld the acquittal, stating that while disturbing, his actions were protected under the First Amendment. Adult star Faye Reagan appeared in over 400 films before vanishing into obscurity following her 2014 retirement. Her life quickly spiraled into constant legal troubles, hard drug use, and homelessness. On May 7th of this year, she mysteriously disappeared from East Charleston Boulevard in Las Vegas, a corridor infamous for crime and desperation. Last seen wearing green sweatpants and carrying a backpack, Reagan has not been seen or heard from since. Photographer Sam Davis captured the incredible moment a snake eel burst out from a heron's stomach while the bird was still flying, having chewed its way through the heron's throat using its pointed tail. Both animals were likely fatally injured. In the 90s, Disney planned to open a theme park called Disney's America near the Civil War battlefields in Virginia. A Disney executive said the park would let visitors feel what it was like to be a slave. Amid intense public outrage and political pressure, Disney ended up scrapping the disastrous project. Beloved by millions, Latina singer Selena was on the verge of global superstardom when cracks began to show behind the scenes of her fame. One of her most devoted fans, Yolanda Saldivar, had pushed her way into Selena's inner circle, first as president of her fan club, then as manager of her boutiques. But what began as genuine admiration eventually spiraled into obsession and control. Yolanda grew possessive, isolating Selena from others, and was soon suspected of embezzling money. In March of 1995, Selena met her at a Corpus Christi motel to retrieve crucial financial documents. Backed into a corner and fearing exposure, Yolanda pulled out a revolver and shot Selena in the back as she tried to leave. Selena managed to run nearly 400 feet to the lobby, leaving a trail of blood behind her before collapsing. With her final breath, she named her killer as Yolanda Saldivar, the woman who was once her biggest fan. In 2019, 18-year-old Denali Bremer from Alaska was messaged by a wealthy tycoon named Tyler, who promised her $9 million if she murdered someone and sent him the proof. Convinced the offer was real, Bremer recruited several friends whom she told she would split the money with, and they chose to target 19-year-old Cynthia Hoffman, a developmentally disabled girl who considered Bremer her best friend. The group lured Cynthia on a fake hiking trip to Thunderbird Falls, where they bound her with duct tape and led her to a remote spot. That's when one of the friends shot her in the back of the head while Bremer filmed the murder and sent the footage to Tyler, after which they dumped the body in the river. Authorities uncovered the plot through digital evidence, leading to multiple arrests. Tyler ended up being an unemployed catfisher named Darren Schillmiller who lived in his parents' basement in Indiana. He was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 99 years in prison, the same sentence handed to Bremer. In 2018, Demi Lovato was found unconscious in her Los Angeles home after ingesting a mix of heroin laced with fentanyl. Her assistant discovered her unresponsive and thought she was already dead since her skin had turned blue. Paramedics administered Narcan to save her life, but what followed was far worse than most people realize. Lovato suffered 3 strokes, a heart attack, and severe brain damage due to a prolonged lack of oxygen from the overdose. She was legally blind for several days and still has blind spots in her vision which affect her ability to drive. She had developed organ failure and placed on dialysis as doctors told her she was only minutes away from death. Even after surviving, her motor skills were severely damaged and she had to relearn how to walk. Demi later admitted that she had asked her dealer for heroin but was instead given fentanyl without her knowledge. Lovato has since spoken openly about the trauma, referring to the near-death experience as the biggest wake-up call of her life. Carl Alfalfa Switzer, the former child star of Our Gang, was shot and killed in 1959 during a dispute over a cash reward related to a lost hunting dog. After finding and returning the dog, Switzer demanded $50 from the dog's owner, Moses Stiltz, resulting in a heated argument at Stiltz's home. Alfalfa allegedly struck Stiltz with a clock, prompting Stiltz to grab his revolver and shoot Alfalfa in the groin, which he eventually bled out from. While Stiltz claimed self-defense, saying Alfalfa threatened him with a knife, a witness later stated that the actor was leaving when he was shot. Despite conflicting accounts, the killing was ruled justifiable and Stiltz was never charged. In 2005, Kenneth Pinion, a renowned Boeing engineer known online as Mr. Hands, died after engaging in receptive intercourse with a stallion on a Washington farm, an act that was recorded by a friend. The incident caused a fatal perforation in his colon, and he was dropped off at a local hospital where he died shortly afterwards. As a direct result, the state passed a law in 2006 criminalizing both bestiality and the creation of such videos. In the summer of 1974, 18-year-old Disneyland cast member Deborah Gale was assigned to the newly opened America Sings ride in Tomorrowland, a rotating theater that featured animatronic animals singing songs from different eras of American history. The attraction had only been open for 9 days when something went horribly wrong during her shift on July 8th. At some point during the rotation, Deborah became caught in a narrow gap between a moving theater wall and a stationary platform. As the mechanism turned, she was crushed in the machinery, likely killing her immediately. Guests seated nearby heard her screams followed by a loud thud, but tragically mistook both for sound effects from the show. In 2009, a member of Al-Qaeda attempted to assassinate Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Nayef by hiding a pound of explosives inside his anus, an unprecedented tactic at the time. Disguised as a remorseful militant surrendering during Ramadan, the terrorist was allowed close access to the prince and even passed through metal detectors without detection. Once face to face, he detonated the device, but his own body absorbed most of the blast, killing him instantly while only slightly injuring the startled prince. In 2002, New York City bartender Sean Doyle was out drinking with his friend Michael Wright when a drunken argument suddenly broke out after Wright accused Doyle of flirting with his girlfriend. In a fit of rage, Wright threw Doyle down an open manhole and he immediately started screaming in agony from below. The shaft led down to a steam tunnel where a ruptured vent had caused the water temperature to reach an estimated 300 degrees Fahrenheit. Doyle survived the fall and was pleading for help while trapped in the boiling water, but the heat and steam were far too intense for rescuers to reach him. Witnesses reported hearing his screams echoing through the streets like a whistling tea kettle, then abruptly stopping. His body was finally recovered 4 hours later, and the medical examiner later described the scene as one of the worst she'd ever seen. The metal of his belt buckle had partially fused with his pelvis, and steam had filled up his lungs until they completely ruptured. His skin had completely peeled away, and his organs were essentially steamed like a lobster. In 1982, renowned actor Vic Morrow and child actors Micah Dinley and Renee Chen were killed on the set of Twilight Zone the movie when a helicopter malfunctioned and crashed during a stunt, decapitating both Morrow and Micah while crushing Renee. The scene involved illegal child labor in unsafe conditions, sparking a high-profile trial against director John Landis, who was ultimately acquitted. The haunting photo on the right shows 7-year-old Renee's grandfather collapsing in grief at her funeral, questioning how this could have possibly happened to his talented young granddaughter. The 1897 Battle of Sarigari is considered to be one of the greatest final stands in history. Just 21 soldiers of the Sikh regiment fought an army of 10,000 Afghans and killed more than 600 of them before being defeated. In Florida, 75-year-old exotic animal enthusiast Marvin Hajos was fatally mauled by his pet cassowary, one of the most dangerous birds on the planet. Authorities believe he tripped and fell near the bird, triggering an aggressive response. The cassowary lashed out with its powerful legs, using its razor-sharp inner claws to slash Marvin's neck and torso apart. The man who had raised exotic animals for decades died en route to the hospital. Hulk Hogan was once a towering 6 foot 7 inches, but has lost up to 5 inches of his height due to his back being fused together after decades of punishing his body in the wrestling ring. Over the past decade alone, he's undergone at least 25 surgeries, including 10 on his back, as well as replacements of both knees and hips and operations on his shoulders and neck. Accordingly, Hogan has described feeling like a human medical experiment and now suffers from brutal chronic pain. About 10,000 Facebook users die every day. It's estimated that by the year 2070, the number of dead profiles will outnumber the living ones, and Facebook will become a digital graveyard. Reclusive siblings Homer and Langley Collier lived in a Harlem townhouse and became notorious for their extreme hoarding. After Homer went blind in the 1930s, Langley quit his job to care for him and began compulsively collecting newspapers and junk, believing that Homer would one day get his sight back and need to catch up on the news. They booby-trapped their home with tunnels of debris to keep people out, eventually withdrawing completely from society. In March of 1947, police discovered Homer's body dead from starvation. Langley had died before him but wasn't found until weeks later due to all the junk in the home. He'd been crushed to death by one of his own traps while trying to bring food to his brother. In 2012, a freak accident saved this woman's life in the craziest way possible. 42-year-old Donna Barber was at a family gathering in Arkansas when her teenage son accidentally shot her straight in the neck with a bow and arrow. The arrow pierced the side of her throat just inches from her carotid artery, close enough that she could feel her pulse pounding against the shaft. For a moment, Dawn remained standing in shock before collapsing in a pool of her own blood. As her family screamed in panic, some believing they just witnessed her death, she was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. But during emergency scans, doctors made a chilling discovery. Nestled deep in her neck, not far from the arrow's path, was a cancerous tumor growing in her thyroid. It hadn't caused any symptoms yet, and without the arrow, it likely would have gone unnoticed until it was far too late. Surgeons carefully removed the arrow then the tumor in a single surgery, and Dawn miraculously went on to make a full recovery.